Can I just say that if Sid somehow ended up getting killed again in his new world, it wouldn't because of a normal defeat or anything like that. I think he more or less has everything down locked. I think it would honestly be his accidental harem, or at the very least, the people that are so attached to him, because the man needs to stop giving out Big Macs. I think that's guaranteed. We still have our girl who's on the run, who's bloody, who's beaten, who's bruised, holding on to that wrapper for her dear life because it is literally her safety blanket right now. And how many times does he keep handing out those burgers? Even though, if I had a nickel for every time, I may only have a couple of nickels, it's still enough that could bite him right in the butt. But seriously, I mean, it just feels like from literally last week, ending with our girl standing there smiling like a menace, to then ending in the exact same way in this episode, and just the fact that the episode kicks off with him being choked to death just because of, hey, you're supposed to come on a train to meet my parents. I mean, the dude really needs to catch a hint, but we know he won't. That's why we love Sid in the Eminence and Shadow. Now, I do have a full live reaction to today's episode available on my Patreon, so if you're interested in seeing that, consider supporting. But yeah, this was another great episode. Of course, we only have 2 more left before we have to say goodbye, but I mean, once again, the show it's been delivering week after week. It's been one of the most enjoyable watches both of last season as well as this one. And I just love the concept that they continue to have fun in these so simplistic ways, but they continue to blow me away. I think it was in last week's video, I made the joke about how, like, he's just not a good friend to his best friend here. Like, literally, it's the most one-sided friendship. And in this episode, we more or less get a scene that kind of goes hand in hand with what I was predicting could eventually happen, because this poor bastard, right? He's just constantly trying to gamble, and you never quite know why he's getting dragged off, whether it's because he didn't pay a debt, whether it's because he just has no more money, he's causing a disturbance, it doesn't quite matter. The fact that in the middle of what should be a pretty typical cliche scene, she ended up getting defeated. Mundane man's giving his speech about basically just trying to look as cool as he possibly can, but being so average so that by the time he leaves, he can just disappear and basically be the Eminence and Shadow. And they're having this like kind of heartfelt, kind of cheesy moment. And in the background, you hear muffled audio and they blur him, so it's like it's not even in focus. And you just see him getting dragged off as he's kicking and screaming. Sid, being Sid, doesn't acknowledge it because it has nothing to do with his plan. Honestly, does he even care about his best friend here? I mean, that literally is his best friend, all things considered. But it's the most one-sided friendship I think I've seen in anime in a long, long time, and I absolutely love it. I just love the fact that this show is just so unapologetically Sid, and the boy can disappear for half of an episode and come back and uncover a mystery or start a new mystery. I mean, you can look at the moment when Mundane Man was fighting, right? You have Perv Asshat who basically, at the end of that match, hey, he's probably from the underground, we need to investigate this, because if he's from the underground, we have problems. This reminds me of so many times when watching Overlord, where you'll see Ainz accidentally insert himself into a situation, not realize he's done it, and then over the course of a season, he'll end up resolving that conflict, having no idea there was a conflict to begin with. Just because of Mundane Man's existence and the way Sid is going about just operating this persona, in general, he's making characters like Perv more or less think he's some double agent from the underground or this or that and the third. And the fact that he has no idea he's doing this, for him it is just chuny playtime. It's hilarious, and that's the exact reason and one of the biggest charms to a series like Overlord, and why I get such a kick out of this, because Overlord being one of the more fun shows I've watched recently, this show just is carrying on that trend, and I mean, it's gonna be hard for any show coming out that isn't Overlord or Eminence and Shadow in order to get me that same level of excitement, because there's just a charm about a character like this, whether it's Ainz or whether it's Sid, and they're two very different characters, but the way they navigate their series is honestly pretty similar, and I love it. But I mean, it's gonna be interesting, right? We have 2 episodes left before we have to say goodbye to the show and wait for a season 2, which, I mean, it's more or less rumored to be in the production pipeline, and I'm willing to believe it. But the thing that I'm excited about is it kind of feels like the direction they'd want to go is they would probably want to resolve the Perv storyline, so whether that means he actually ends up dead or not, I don't know. It was pointed out to me because I made a mention a couple videos back. I wasn't sure if like the king was already dead or if it was just some sort of mind spell. But either way, I was saying like there's probably no recovering from that just given how he looks. But it was pointed out that there was a mention at some point about a smell surrounding that man. So most likely that is a corpse that is basically just being animated into what seems to be life. So, I mean, that's probably a decaying body, all things considered. But I mean, I already was thinking even if he was quote unquote alive, the boy's mind is definitely completely gone. So, I mean, Perv dying seems all but guaranteed. Even if they didn't do it at the end of, say, episode 19 or episode 20, eventually the dude's gotta end up dead. It's just a matter of when, not if. But I mean, every time you enter and leave an episode of this show, you just know there's gonna be two key things that are gonna happen. You're gonna see some of the most typical and predictable plot points in these types of shows, but you're also gonna see it get completely parodied and flipped on its head. And that's exactly what happened. Look at the friend moment where they're like parting after the duel and the friend's being dragged off. It's a really funny way to get turn it into something a little more interesting. But even like the duel, right? I mean, the duel is just so good. In general, Sid's plan for Mundane Man, it actually makes sense for what he wants to do. He's trying to basically make someone who everyone's basically talking about how he's very fast, but there's nothing else there. But over the course of the matches, he gets more and more impressive to the general public. By the end, he'll disappear into the shadow, no one will know where he went, and he'll have made a name for himself. And he even brings up the concept that he could go the evil route. It's just like, he's such a chuny, and I love it, right? But in general, these moments end up crafting bigger moments, in the case of, say, Perv, thinking it's a lot deeper than it actually is, or even Sid uncovering the cultist activities that's going on in this world and his entire Shadow Garden operation. They're not just playing chuny like he is, like they're uncovering some big things, and I really enjoy what they're doing. There just isn't a lot like shows like Eminence and Shadow, and it's why it's, you know, the closer you get to the ends of the episodes, the more you realize that, man, we're really gonna have to wait for more. But I honestly think the thing that has sold me as hard as I have on this show is Sid's VA. He is just a goofball. He rarely gives off confidence. There's a couple of key moments like the I Am Atomics, where it's like that blend of ridiculous meets badass in a way. But for the most part, he's just such a goofy character that you don't expect would take crowbars to villains, or not even villains, but just general robbers and kidnappers of his original world. But that's exactly what he does. And seriously, whenever he eventually does end up biting the dust, it's not going to be for anything insane. It's not going to be for anything life or death in the typical sense. He's probably going to end up dead from his harem. He's going to trip down a hole. It's just going to be the most goofy thing for his end, and it's going to be the most perfect for Sid's character in general. I mean, there's probably a lot of logical ways to explain things, like in last week's episode, how did he get a grand piano down there? Maybe he has a video game inventory system, maybe he can teleport, and maybe he can buy those feathers from a pillowcase, right, in terms of how he got everything to happen last week. But it's funnier to think of Sid as the type of guy to awkwardly carry a grand piano down how many flights of stairs and go hunting birds for those feathers, because the more ridiculous you think of Sid, the more you like Sid as a character, and that's kind of the charm of the show in general. But of course, I'll pass the torch over to you. What did you think of the Eminence and Shadow episode 18? Let me know down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, ring that bell if you want to get as many notifications to the channel as possible, and as I mentioned, full live reaction is available on my Patreon. And while you're there, you'll also get yourself a video shoutout like a handful of people are getting today. So we got Chemist, Tabrian Timothy, Dawn, and Demon Emperor. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.